Hello and welcome to what will be the first video, and I believe will be a 3-video series on the Cottage build. Now, some of the previous videos, if you've happened to check them out, and I'll put links down below to them, are video 7, the wooden planks video, and video 8, the clay stones video, which sort of led into the design or were key and instrumental in developing portions of this build. So please check those out if you haven't already, if you're interested in following any of these procedures. So what I started out with, I just started out with a rough drawing that I did to get an idea, and this was really based on stuff I've seen on the internet and or movies I've seen on TV, is what I thought that the cabin or the cottage would look like. So there were a few design elements that I wanted to think about when I was putting this thing together. I wanted it to be easy to assemble, meaning I didn't want it to have to snap together or be glued and have it be a fixed thing that you needed to store away. I wanted it to be able to break down fairly easily and put in a box if you want. I wanted it to be configurable, which meant that I also wanted to have the ability to use walls in different buildings. So if I had a tavern or something that I was putting together, I could use a wall for that, and I could also use that same wall in a house, depending on the way I wanted to do the configuration. I wanted to be easily reproducible, meaning I wanted to design it so that I can create multiple walls and multiple copies of the same walls for both my own use and possibly to make available to others out there as well. And the last sort of major requirement I had is I want it to be a one-part mold only. For those that are familiar with mold making, if you have a 2-part mold, it really takes twice as much rubber to make it, and it's a lot more difficult to actually do the casting. Okay, so those were the requirements that I had to begin with, so without any further ado, let's get to the build itself. The first area that I wanted to concentrate on was how I was going to fasten the walls together. Now, as you remember, one of the requirements was I wanted to be able to assemble and disassemble these very quickly and easily. So what I came up with was a tongue and groove hybrid solution where a wall will have one of each of these types of connections at each end. So what I wanted to do was just make sure that this was going to function as designed. I mean, it sounded good to me, but as opposed to creating the whole cottage with these type of things and then printing it out and then assembling it and finding out, hey, it doesn't work, I figured, hey, why don't I just print a corner section off to make sure that it works. So that's what you're seeing here. So once I've got this in SketchUp, I'm going to print it out on a 3D printer and see how it works. So once I decided that the tongue and groove was the way to go, before I actually created any of the walls, I wanted to do some samples of the connectors. So I printed out one of each to scale. You may have noticed on the previous video or portion of the video that these are 2 inches high and 1/4 inch thick. So as I slide one into the other, it provides a nice snug fit, and it's going to work quite well. Alright, now that we're comfortable that this tongue and groove solution will work, I have attached one of each of these 2 sections to each corner of each side of the wall. So I printed out created 4 different wall sections here. Now, because this was a prototype for me, I wanted to keep it real simple. The simplicity was 1 window, 1 door, and a fairly small build. It's only 3 inches by 2 inches, which equates to about 15 feet by 10 feet if you have a 5-foot to 1 inch scale. So what we're looking at for each of these 4 walls is the outside of the walls. Now, the area that's sort of depressed in this is what we're going to be filling in with our building materials. Now, in order to aid the building of this, what I've done is I've created some inserts that fall into each of these. So what you're looking at here is the insert for one of the end pieces for the top part of it. So what I've done is I'm taking some of the clay that I've cut into timbers and sort of doing a rough layout of it. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way is because you'll see later on, those cutouts will slide right down into the recessed areas, and we'll glue them in for good stability. But this helps in making sure that all the pieces are exactly the same. Now, the other part of this is doing the bottom part of the end piece as well. So there's 2 timbers here. One is going to be the timber that runs horizontally, and there's going to be a timber that runs vertically for the top half of it. The bottom part is going to be the stones. So now what we've done is, you may recognize this from one of the previous videos, is the stamp we used to make our wooden planks. So we're going to create another little mini wooden plank for the top stanchion of the square piece. I also had printed off on the 3D printer a little guide to help me have exact size planks, so that's what you see right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure the height that we need and cut it off at the bottom, and that will form the top of the top of the wall section. So on either side of that top there's going to be paper mache product that we're going to be using a little bit later. So now that we've got the timbers cut, they still haven't been fired yet, so what I'm going to do is just press on the sides of each of them like this, just to straighten them up quite a bit, because they are a little bit flexible before they get fired in the oven. So once they've been fired in the oven, it's time to actually assemble them. So what I've done is created another template on a 3D printer that's just a little bit wider than the top part. So what that's going to allow me to do is really make sure that I'm getting these things positioned as close to the edge as possible. So I am using super glue for these timbers, and we're putting the first timber in, making sure it stays nice and snug to the top, and then we'll put the bottom timber in as well. Now once that dries, we will be adding our paper mache to all three quadrants right there as well. Okay, now what I'm doing is I am adding the paper mache product. This has dried. You don't see that it's dried, but the product I'm using is called Celluclay. You can pick it up at Michael's or at AC Moore. It's about $8 or $8.50 a box. I just used a wee little bit here. It's a water-based paper mache product, and it works quite well. It seems to take about, I let these dry overnight, and they dried pretty hard. So you can see in the background I've already done the bottom part of the wall. Now I'm just doing the area up in the roof. So I've pulled the border off, and I should have let it dry. Lesson learned, because it actually pulled some of the paper mache off. It was still wet. So I've fixed that up, and I'm going to set it down and let that dry. But that's the orientation it's going to be. It's going to find itself in whenever we assemble it. So now we can see our wall section that's going to fit right into the bottom part, and the top will go right there once we're ready. But we also have these areas in the side that we need to add some timbers to. So there's going to be anything that's going to be exposed has to have the timber on it. You don't want this plastic to be showing. So I've cut a piece of timber to size here. Now I just got to score the top off, make sure that it's the correct height, and we'll hard fire that guy up as well to make him nice and hard. Alright, the next part is going to be adding the stones to the bottom half of the wall. Now you probably have seen, or you may have seen, the stone video in the previous one. That's how I made all of these little stones, but I just sort of laid them out in there. Wasn't going to bore you with all of that. Now here's the actual assembly of one of the end pieces. So I've taken the part that's completely dry now, and I'm using a tacky glue to hold these into place. And top part's in, slide the bottom part in as well, and then we still have the timbers on the sides that we need to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to use super glue for those. They've already been cut and fired, so we're attaching each of those. And there we have that. I just want to do a quick test here to show you how they're going to slide in. And I also have to note that that part right there is going to need timber as well, because it's an exposed area. So again, I've used our mold from the previous video, and I've cut a piece that fits there, and we'll glue that after it's fired up. So that's, we're going to call it a quit for the first video here. I want to keep these to about 10 minutes in length and no longer. So you see we got a really good start on the cottage. It's looking pretty good. We've got all the major components in. We have a lot of trim work and stuff to do in the insides, and talk about the windows and doors and stuff like that. But hey, thanks for checking the video out. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Take care and have a great day. Goodbye.